Moat on the volley, and yes! Corner. What a start for West Bromwich Albion. Unbelievable! West Bromwich Albion have ruined his big day.
Line again, and it's Adam Wingy who gets the final touch, and West Bromwich Albion now have a 2-goal cushion.
The Baggies Podcast, giving you the latest news, views and opinions on all things Albion. Hello and welcome back to the Baggies Podcast, where of course we're giving you all the latest news, views and opinions on all things Albion. Back again today with another episode. Coming up on today's show, we're going to be chatting about what was a fantastic weekend for West Bromwich Albion as a club. Starting off with a 2-0 victory against Hull City for the men's side, but also a fantastic victory, another 2-0 victory at the Hawthorns for West Bromwich Albion's women's team against Derby County Women in their first ever game at the home of West Brom. We'll be chatting through all that. I also had the chance after that game to chat with Dave Lawrence, who is the Director of Football at West Bromwich Albion Women, and he gave me his thoughts on the occasion and what that was like to put on such an event like that and a historic day for West Bromwich Albion Women. So stick around for that interview if that's something you're interested in. But we'll start, of course, by chatting about the men's game, which was West Bromwich Albion 2, Hull City 0. But yeah, if you're new around here, be sure to subscribe to the Baggies Podcast YouTube channel, whether that be on your podcast provider, wherever you're listening, watching from. If you're watching, you'll see me waving at you now, but if you're listening, you'll just have to sort of imagine that. If you're new around here, be sure to leave a nice little rating on your podcast provider. 5 stars would be fantastic if you could do that for us. And also, leave us a nice comment on YouTube if you've enjoyed the episode. Drop your thoughts down below. Follow me on Twitter at thebaggiespodcast or at @LouisBen_. And we'll crack on with today's episode. It's been a fantastic week for West Bromwich Albion as a club, so hopefully let's get straight into this. So let's crack straight on, of course. As I mentioned, if you want to hear the interview with Dave Lawrence, Director of Football at West Bromwich Albion Women, stick around until the end of the episode, because that's when I'll be sticking that in, and I'll be also chatting about the women's game that I, of course, visited. But I also did a matchday vlog from that particular fixture, so make sure you go and check that out if you haven't already. But let's start with the men's team. Of course, on Saturday, they picked up the first win in 7 games against Hull City, 2-0 victory away. I can't even remember what their stadium's called. I think they've changed it so many times. I think to me it's the KCOM Stadium, but I feel like they may have got another sponsor over the top of that to change that and move that out of the way. Yeah, it feels like ages since I've done a podcast episode solo, for now anyway, until you hear me and myself and Dave chat later. But yeah, I'm sort of blagging my way along, but I have got a lot of preparation in front of me to talk about the game, which was obviously a great win for Albion and a fantastic time to pick up a victory when it looked like things were down and out really for the club this season. I think surprise is probably, as I said, the main emotion that comes from that. As I said, the first win, it's actually the first win in 8 games, I suppose, because that was the 8th game that would have been without a win. But, Hull, I think my observation is that they did look a very poor side. I think that's the only way that I can kind of express that this wasn't the best opposition that we could have faced. But then again, you can only beat who's in front of you. And if we had a loss yesterday, I'd have felt really disheartened again by the performances at West Brom. But I went into the game and I was expecting a draw. If you watched my match preview, then you'd have seen that it was I predicted a 0-0 draw, I think, for that one. I just couldn't see us scoring, but in the end they proved us wrong. I think Steve Bruce got things more things right than wrong. I think personally throughout his time at Albion so far, he's got more things wrong than right. But I think he's starting to really put the right decisions in, and as we saw with the lineup, which we'll chat about a little bit later on, it started to turn into something a little bit different, and I was really pleased with the way that we went about picking up this victory and getting the win. So personally, obviously Hull are obviously a very, very poor side. I think that's the first way I can go about saying things. Obviously, they've had a bit of a boost with their new ownership, had a bit of a boost with the way that they've had their club run over the past few years, and they're now feeling a lot better towards it and now feeling a lot more positive towards it. So, yeah, I think ultimately I was surprised that we won, but then again, I would expect us to beat Hull. I think that's a fair comment. I wouldn't want to disrespect Hull in any way, but ultimately you should be expecting to win against you know, in a game like this, you would expect a side with the quality of West Brom and the quality of players that we have to pick up a victory against Hull. But yeah, if we start by talking about the changes to the 11, I've literally mapped out the 11 here, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. And I've got thoughts on each different player and their performances, as I think the players do need to come under the microscope, and it's about time they started to be accounted for. Actually, before we start about the predicted lineup, I wanted to chat about the article in The Athletic. I think that was something that was really shocked me, I think, a little bit. I think that was probably the main emotion for that. I think that did shock me, and I think that did sort of make me go, something's not quite right. So yeah, if I sort of bring that up and we'll chat about that. If you didn't see it, essentially the players have come out and directed, I'll say a little bit of the blame, or a large, I might even say a large proportion of the blame towards a lot of the supporters for the performances that they have been giving so far this season, and their poor performances, and where we are in the league essentially. So yeah, let's go over to that. I'm sure I've got it on here somewhere. It is somewhere, I promise. But yeah, it was ultimately very disappointed to read. So the thing it said was, multiple sources have referenced the toxic atmosphere at the Hawthorns, and increasingly among away fans, as a key reason for inhibited displays, with players reluctant to receive the ball and scared to take risks or be creative. So what I kind of gained from that is, well, firstly, I wanted to make the point that the atmosphere has not been great at the Hawthorns for a while. I think, it's been quite quiet. Large proportion of the time it's been relatively quiet, but away from home, I think that's pretty harsh. I'd say the away support is the best. I'd say one of the best away supports I've seen in the league. Constantly singing, constantly supporting the team. I think the only time where things maybe didn't got a little bit toxic was against Millwall. I think there was some behaviour of fans that I don't think any West Bromwich Albion supporter or anybody at the club would have certainly been proud of. But to essentially chuck a little bit of the blame onto the toxic atmosphere and the kind of the chanting, the "you're not fit to wear the shirt." I do feel like that's a bit of blame passing for me, and that doesn't quite sit right in my mind as to how they're kind of passing the buck on this particular issue. Where was their excuse for the appalling season that we saw last season under Big Sam, where Big Sam had to chuck several of the senior players out of the side to get a tune out of the football club and the squad itself? There were no fans in the ground for that, for their abject displays where they were hammered by Crystal Palace. They were hammered by Leeds United. They were hammered by Arsenal. There was no excuse for that. I didn't see any excuse for that sort of thing. I didn't see them coming out and going, they didn't have anybody to blame. But all of a sudden, when they're winning, it's the fans. They're brilliant. Thank you for your support. They're fantastic. But when things aren't going their way and things haven't worked out for them, and then they're clearly not putting in the hard yards, it seems to me that the fans get the amount of what seems like the brunt of the blame here from Albion's players, and I think that's a bit disgraceful. And I wouldn't take that myself as a supporter who goes to as many games as I possibly can. Obviously I'm not the sort of person who chants abusive things at players, at our players anyway, and I certainly wouldn't be at all for that sort of thing, and I wouldn't be condoning any of the perhaps abuse that they may have received, but ultimately they have to take responsibility for some of their displays. There's no excuse for some of these performances that we've seen. There's no excuse for being what I'll say outplayed by a team like Millwall. There's no excuse for that. There's absolutely no excuse. You can, essentially what they're saying is we've been booed a bit, so we're a bit afraid to take on some responsibility for our performances, and I think that's a bit out of order in my mind. I think as a professional footballer, you can't expect to be supported, cheered. You can't expect that. Supported and cheered every single thing you do. You are going to do some things wrong, and when I think the fans will draw the line, they can draw the line on a lack of ability all day, every day. I think if I saw a team that, like, I'm going to say a side like Luton, who I don't think creatively, technically, they've got the best side, but I can see them putting in 100%. And if I was a Luton fan, I'd be absolutely over the moon with the way that they're playing and the way that they're getting on, because I can see a lack of ability. And maybe if they did get battered a few times this season, I could probably accept that, because there is maybe not the best ability in the side, but certainly for effort, they're there. But for Albion, there's a lot of ability in that side. There's several promotion winners in that side. There's lots of fantastic players who have lit up the championship before in that side. And I'm not seeing any of them come to fruition, really, with their effort levels. I'm not seeing that match up a lot of the time. I'm not seeing that their ability and their effort is really combining and creating something that they can look in hope towards. They looked a side in complete lethargy against Swansea, towards the last stage of that game, and it was concerning to see that. So that's my touch on that. That's my touch on the thing in the Athletic. I wasn't pleased at all with the comments made by reportedly the sources around the players. I thought that was disgraceful, and I think to criticise the supporters is probably the worst thing you could do, because they are the people who pay the money. They give you, obviously the TV money is a lot more than gate receipts and stuff like that, but they are the people that will back you and back the team and back the club wherever you go. I think this is one of the most loyal, reasonable supporting groups. I think a lot of the time, I do think that a lot of the time this season, especially under Val, there was a lot of reactionary responses by the fan base, and I think that's maybe where they're coming from a little bit. However, the boos are, I don't get the booing during the game. Maybe if there has been, I think there has been a little bit of that, and I don't get the booing during the game. I think that's a bit harsh, and that's where the players might be coming from. But at the end of the game, at the half-time, I think that's perfectly reasonable if fans want to voice their frustration. We've only been winning a small number of times at half-time this season, so yeah, in my opinion, I think that things need to change among the playing staff, whether that be their effort, their attitudes, or the personnel itself. I think you can't blame the fans, I think, for the performances this season. I think there has to be a degree of responsibility that you take yourself. So let's chat a little bit about the actual football side of things. The changes to the 11 that Steve Bruce decided to bring in. So he started Matt Clark at centre-back, which I thought was a nice idea. Of course, went to a 3 at the back. I think that did really help the concept of the performance, and I think this side are so enrooted into playing 3 at the back. It's almost helpful that they get to play that a bit more often, and they get the chance to use that formation a bit more frequently. Because for me, that without the 3 at the back, they start to look a little bit more exposed. It's almost like they haven't really. It's almost like they haven't really played at a 4 for so long. It's pretty difficult. So, yeah, I'll say that the 3 at the back did help, and Matt Clark coming in made things look a bit more solid. Darnell Furlong came in back at right wing back. Taylor Gardner-Hickman was the big start. I was delighted to see him getting a start. But I do feel a little bit that Bruce is kind of pandering to the fans a little bit with the way he's done that and the way he's brought him back into the side. Maybe I'm not convinced that in his own mind was what he would have wanted to do. I think if he had his way, he would have wanted to keep playing Reach. But I think the fans can see a lot, and they do know a bit more than a lot give them credit for. There needs to be some form of a respect for the fans, I think, for their opinions, because if so many fans and essentially the entire fan base wanted to see Taylor Gardner-Hickman start, even if it wasn't at midfield, they'd want to see him start at right wing back, myself included. I want to see him play. I want to see him get a game, and the fact that he'd only played 10 minutes under Bruce, I think that's awful in itself. But I do feel that Bruce was pandering a little bit to the fans. Full credit to him for making the decision, but I can't help feel that's the way he went about things and the way that he started, that he put him in. I can't help but feel that's a little bit sort of like, we're giving you a little bit of what you want now, fans. I do feel like that's a bit of the case with the play style as well. So yeah, that was good to see from Steve Bruce. He also brought in Carlan Grant, and Jake Livermore returned from his suspension. I said before the game that he walks back into the side, and that's the most concerning thing. That people have said he's been so poor this season. I don't think he's been that bad. I think that a lot of it has been a bit of an overreaction. But Jake Livermore coming straight back into the side, I think, tells you a lot about what you need to know about how the midfield's been so far this season. But I'll give you my thoughts on the game as a whole. I think obviously to get the first goal from Carlan Grant was the best thing that could have happened. A bit of confidence in the side, a bit of a boost. However, when we did score, we did get a little bit complacent, and thankfully that penalty came just after half time to sort of put Hull to bed really, and to give them the chance to sort of smear the chances of them getting back into the game, I suppose. But I thought that we looked comfortable more in possession. I don't think we looked necessarily out of possession. I think that does need a little bit of work. Hull found themselves in with a little bit of a chance a bit far too often for my liking. A lot of the space between the defensive line and the midfield line at times. And maybe a bit too easy to play from the back and play through the thirds, I think, from Hull yesterday. But yeah, a couple of chances for Hull. Keane Lewis-Potter had one. Jacob Greaves had one at point-blank range. It was a fantastic save from Sam Johnston, who was clearly wearing the correct gloves this time. I don't know what gloves he was wearing against Swansea City, but they clearly didn't help him at all, and he clearly rubbed a bit of butter on them, which didn't help things at all. But, in the end, I think it was a decent performance overall. I think they have to take credit for the way they played, the way they dug in at times. But there were times where there were moments where I thought, oh, here we go, Hull might grab themselves a goal here. And that's where I kind of worried a little bit, because if you're playing a better side that aren't struggling to score as much as Hull City, I think you may concede a goal or two in that particular moment. So yeah, disappointing to see some of the chances that they created so easily. But however, going forward, I thought we looked a bit better, and it's just nice to watch us score some goals. I think that's probably the main thing, and the biggest thing for me. It's just nice to watch us score some goals and nice to watch us pick up a victory for the first time in what seems like forever. So yeah, very pleased with that. If I move on to the lineup, I can chat you through essentially every player that played a significant amount of time yesterday. So starting with Sam Johnston in goal, he made some great saves, I thought, throughout the game. And as I said, brought the right gloves with him this time. The Jacob Greaves chance was the real gilt-edged one for me that really concerned me a lot. Good goalkeeper performance, and definitely better than Swansea, I think, for Johnston. I thought he picked up a lot of stick again after the game at Swansea, and I think rightfully so. I think as an England goalkeeper, the best, what I'd consider to be one of the best goalkeepers in the Championship, I think you have to save probably both of those chances that Swansea had, Perot and Ryan Christie, that they scored. Yeah. Against Hull City, a lot better, and deserved a lot of praise for his performance and for kind of keeping them in the game. If he hadn't have made that stop, they'd have scored it. It would have been 2-1. They'd have had the chance to come back into the game. So yeah, Hull would have had the tails up and had the feeling that they could get something. And with the confidence levels of the squad, I think it was so important that Sam Johnston made that save, because if they'd have scored, I just worry for their confidence and how their confidence levels would have just completely gone down and been shot by that particular moment. So yeah, ultimately Sam Johnston looked a lot better in goal, and the back three I thought were pretty decent in terms of their shape and their discipline. I'll start with Semi Ajayi, who I thought was really good progressively. Progressively carrying the ball into the midfield. He acted as a sort of third man in there, a fourth man in there at times to kind of clog up that area. But he was really good at kind of bringing the ball out from the back, and I enjoyed his performance. I thought he was very defensively solid. I thought there was a little bit of a mix-up, and I'll say it before I get on to Bartley. I thought there's a little bit of a mix-up with Ajayi. Again, Tyler Smith, I think, was in the middle, and it was the same as the Michael Obafemi chance against Swansea City, where they'd split, and then all of a sudden find themselves in a difficult position because they've kind of split apart from each other, and the striker's got in the middle, and the communication doesn't seem there. I think that's something that Bruce really needs to iron out, because a good striker puts those chances away. Thankfully, I think he was offside, but a good striker Michael Obafemi, could have put away that chance against Swansea, and Tyler Smith, if he hadn't been offside, could have certainly put away that chance. I think that was the most difficult thing for me. He looked more defensively sound. He carried the ball well. Carl Bartley looked a bit shaky when passing the ball, I thought. Maybe distribution was not a strong point in this game. I think that needs to be left a bit more to Clark and Ajayi. As I said, that mix-up between himself and Ajayi was a little bit concerning as to how they managed to get that chance so easily with just a very simple cross and a very simple ball into the box. But Bartley, of course, not the captain. Now Jake Livermore's the captain. I do think he has a certain amount of leadership. I do think Bartley is one of the players that cares. I think I've seen a lot of players that have kind of gone and have kind of gone off the radar, and I've seen a lot of players be receiving a lot of stick, and I don't think Bartley should be one of them. If he was one of these so-called bad eggs that we got in the side, why was Sam Allardyce starting in, week out in the Premier League? He's clearly mouldable, and he's clearly a player that's willing to try his best and willing to keep going. So yeah, that's what I would say about Bartley. I think it's a little harsh that maybe he's received a lot of the brunt of the criticism. yeah, I'd say that Sam Allardyce wouldn't have kept him in the side. The Sam Allardyce that everybody knows for clearing out the Albion squad and keeping us, I suppose, in the chance with survival. If Bartley hadn't have been there, if Bartley was a bad egg, then he wouldn't have been in the squad, quite frankly. Matt Clark at left centre back, he was good, very good. In fact, a solid 8 out of 10, maybe even a 9 out of 10 performance. Read the game so well down that left hand side, and he allowed Connor Townsend to really get forward, get his ambition into the box, and play really well. I just thought it was fantastic, and a massive fair play to Matt Clark for giving in such a fantastic performance. I think that he's not been, he's left us wanting a little bit from at times throughout the season. But however, I think that he today, against Hull City was absolutely fantastic. He won the ball nearly every single time it came at him. I think we just improve if we're in the back three. I think he has to play. I think he has to be involved in the side. He read the game so well, won the ball nearly every time, as I said. And with him in the back three, I think we just look a lot more solid. I've seen a lot of slander towards him as well, but I do feel like he's worth a go and worth getting involved. So keep him in the side if you're going to play a three at the back. I think it's desperately needed, and you have to keep that going. But yeah, he's been a bit off and on throughout the season so far, but definitely against Hull looked more defensively sound and looked a lot better by all accounts. So yeah, pleased with Matt Clark's performance, and I think he'll go a long way with games like that into implementing himself into Steve Bruce's mind for selection. Onto the wing backs, Donald Furlong and Connor Townsend. I think Townsend, I was worried about him for the past few weeks. He's looked really out of sorts as a player and looked like a player who just isn't the same player as we've seen before. But ultimately, he looked more solid. He looked less exposed with Matt Clark behind him. I think he does suit a three at the back, and I think he could be more of a wing back maybe. But I do see a lot of fullback traits in him. But there is a chance for him to play wing back a bit more often. So yeah, pleased with his performance ultimately. Pleased with the way that he played. But we'll see, I think, as to how we kind of get on with him and how if he continues to play under par as he has been throughout the past few games. But ultimately against Hull City, he was very good and very defensively sound. Didn't really set the world alight in terms of an attacking output, but definitely at the back in terms of his defensive output, he's better than he has been, and less space around him. I think obviously that's something I'd like to see work on, is the space in wide areas for opposition wingers and forwards to peel off into. But for me, Connor Townsend was a great performer in that game and looked solid and less exposed, as I said, with Matt Clark behind him. Donald Furlong, he's good when creating space for others. He's quite a quiet game, but certainly put the hard yards in, as I don't think a lot of Albion players have been doing of late. But Donald Furlong, I thought, was decent when creating that space for others. You saw there was a chance for Taylor Gardner-Hickman to cross the ball, and that was created by Furlong sort of using himself as a decoy and then just passing it back to Gardner-Hickman. There were several times throughout the game where he managed to combine with Gardner-Hickman and I think Callum Robinson as well. But yeah, much improved from Darnell Furlong. I thought he was a lot better and deserves credit for his performance. Just the team deserve credit for their performance as well. I think overall, I'm going through this list and I'm not seeing any bad performers really. I'm not seeing any standout shockers from any of the teams. But Jake Levenmore coming back into the side, the captain, I thought he was man of the match against Hull City. It's just much better when shielding the defence rather than having to chase around the pitch and try and become a box-to-box midfielder. He's not that player anymore, and I think Bruce has to recognise that playing him in an 8 is probably one of the worst things that you could do. However, I do think that he's much more effective in that holding midfield role. Even on the ball in that holding midfield role, he has more space. He looks a lot brighter on the ball because he's got that space and time to pick his pass and try and pick out the pass that he needs. So yeah, I think that was great from Jake Livermore, and he worked really hard in that midfield area and deserved full credit for his performance. So yeah, well done to Jake Livermore, man of the match for me. Definitely better intercepting passes, cutting off those passing lanes, and yeah, looked a lot better, as I said, defensively, and deserves credit fully for his performance. Taylor Gardner-Hickman, superb. I thought it was great to see him back in the starting lineup. the high pressing and his energy that won the penalty. Hopefully he doesn't get dropped after this performance. I think, if he gets dropped, I know we talk about confidence in this team and this group of players that we've had for a while, but what about Gardner-Hickman's confidence if he gets dropped after that display? There's no reason for him to be dropped, and I hope Bruce sees what everybody else and all the fans have been seeing for so long now, and I've been saying for a large amount of time, Gardner-Hickman deserves his chance, and I hope he doesn't get dropped after that performance, because he doesn't get the chance, and hopefully he doesn't get dropped and gets the chance next game to impress and keep things going. But yeah, pleased with Gardner-Hickman's performance. He was another 8 out of 10 for me. Alex Mowat was better as well. I thought great ball in for Grant's goal. I thought he did help Gardner-Hickman find his feet and keep mentoring him, and there was a lot of talking between the two of him and Jake Livermore, of course. But that best midfield performance of the season came between Gardner-Hickman and Alex Mowat, and I think we saw that again today, and I think they looked a lot more stable with Livermore behind them. As I said, Mowat helped Gardner-Hickman find his feet in that middle of the park. It was a great ball in for Grant's goal. If he didn't touch it, it was going in that bottom corner anyway. So yeah, well played to both of those players in the midfield and the midfield three. I thought that was the most effective midfield three maybe I've seen this season, and I think that was essential to what we had to do. But up front, I thought that Callum Robinson was so deep. I think he was probably playing in midfield quite a lot of the time. It was almost a 3-6-1 at times. He was almost deeper than Mowat, and Mowat was getting in behind a bit more than Robinson. It was a strange decision by Bruce to obviously instruct Robinson a lot deeper than that. But yeah, he was very deep at times. I thought he could have added a little bit more, but I suppose he's so deep in the pitch, and it's not somewhere he's used to be playing. But he was good. As I said, there's no real shockers. I thought maybe Robinson was the worst performer in the side if I had to pick one, but he was definitely very deep. I thought that was a really odd tactical decision by Bruce to stick him in that sort of deep playmaker role for what I'd consider a striker or a winger. And that Karlan Grant, as I said, as I always say, he doesn't add very much in the game, but when the goals have won the game, I don't care. I really don't. A penalty that was well put away. Of course, he missed one against Millwall earlier in the season, and also a great finish, I suppose, from Mowat's goal. Good goal scoring instincts to stick your leg out and pick up a goal with that particular thing from him. So yeah, I think it was overall a really good team performance, and Bruce got more things right than wrong, whereas he's got more things wrong than right previously. But yeah, really great team performance from the side, and I'm really pleased to see them really racking up that the goal count, I suppose, with 2 goals, but also just getting 3 points on the board is so crucial, and I hope this can be the start of a run. I do think playoffs are a long shot, and I do think promotion's a long shot, but if we can finish the season in strong vein, I think that helps you when you go into next season. So yeah, a great performance, and another great performance, of course, from West Bromwich Albion women's team, a 2-0 victory against Derby County. Yeah, what a great occasion for them in their first ever match at the Hawthorns. Yeah, I was there. It was a great atmosphere. I suppose it was sort of 3/4, half the West Stand was filled out for this particular game, and they filled it. We certainly filled it as fans, and there was a lot of support for the ladies out there in their first ever game at the Hawthorns. It was a great occasion, a really nice match to watch as well. A win against a much better Derby side who have really strided home with the league at times. I think into second place. I think they are. They had double the points of Albion before the game, and Albion 8th place and Derby 2nd. So it was a great victory. Lee Dugmore got the opening goal, and I thought that she was fantastic. She was really great and worked her socks off really in that performance. And yeah, she's such a grafter, and as Dave will say in a bit, it was a real great performance from her particularly. And then Eve Gallop, of course, got the goal later on. I think it was actually probably her first touch of the game. She came on as a substitute. And another player that impressed me was Trina Greaves. She was in midfield. It was actually her 100th appearance for the club, and what a time to get it. And she went down injured probably about 4 or 5 times, but she was a real battler in the middle of the park. But yeah, there were so many great performers in the Albion side, and they worked their socks off, and they played so many times they could have potentially crumbled under the pressure of playing in front of so many fans. This isn't an audience that they've been used to playing in very often at all, and to come in and potentially play in front of that many people, they could have crumbled, and they could have maybe got beaten quite heavily by Derby, but they really stood up, they rose to the occasion, and full credit to them for doing so. They were absolutely incredible, and it was a great occasion, as I said, to watch that game. And a really great experience for me to open my eyes to women's football, because I'm not an avid watcher of it, but I certainly I'm definitely interested in watching a lot more of West Bromwich Albion women's more often now, because they really smashed it, and it was nice to see a lot of interaction towards the end of the game between the players and the fans. How often do you see, apart from when kids hold up a cardboard sign, how often do you see the men's players go over and have pictures with fans? It was great to see so many of them doing so, and the players clearly appreciate the support and they rose to the occasion, and it was great to see. But yeah, as I said, I spoke to Dave Lawrence, director of football at West Bromwich Albion Women, after the game. He was very kind in coming over and having a quick chat with me for the podcast, and the full interview is about 6 minutes long. So yeah, I'll let Dave do the talking now with regards to his thoughts on Albion Women. But he was absolutely delighted with what a fantastic day it was for the club. Hi Baggies fans, I'm here with Dave Lawrence, West Bromwich Albion Women's Director of Football. Dave, a fantastic occasion. How are you feeling after that?
There's so much work that's gone into today in terms of off the field stuff and making sure the stadium's prepared and we're prepared, ticketing, players preparing for the game and everything. I'm just delighted with the way it's gone. When you put so much effort into something, so much care into something, for it to come out in fruition with a 2-0 win on the pitch and everybody being so happy and excited, and I think chomping at the bit to get more of what they've had today is a really good result. So yeah, it couldn't have gone much better. Yeah,
and the performance was fantastic from the ladies out there. They really were dug in front of the fans. What was your assessment of the game itself? Because the game itself almost became second nature sort of before the game because of the big occasion.
I needed to remember that there was something happening at 2 o'clock to be fair today. But yeah, I think that we knew that Derby are going to be very organised. They are a very organised, very good side. They move the ball well, and the concern when you play on a pitch the size of the Hawthorns pitch that we're not necessarily accustomed to, the concern is, are we going to get overplayed? Are we going to get overpowered, and the pitch size will become a problem? But actually, our organisation, our shape without the ball was fantastic. We took the chances that we had, even though probably Derby shaded the chances. But the effort from the girls was absolutely outstanding. I think what really helped was the squad, real squad game today. Subs that were ready to come on and put in a big shift because legs were tiring and so on. So from everybody, it's just been a huge effort down to every person involved.
Yeah, absolutely. And fans, they really packed out the Halford Lane stand. How pleased are you to see so many fans here supporting the girls today?
It was a brilliant moment when we scored the first goal and people were boinging in the crowd, and it's like, it's the kind of thing you want to happen, almost, that you dream about, is that a ladies team take to the pitch and you've got boinging going on in the crowd, and it felt like a real West Bromwich Albion day today, not just for the ladies team but for the whole club. The fact that we backed it up with a good performance was, as I say, outstanding, and hopefully it's the start of many occasions like this, and we can really utilise this to say to people, we mean business, we're professional, we're organised in what we do, and we should have more opportunities and experiences like this for the players, staff and for the fans. Yeah, and you're hoping that this crowd, hopefully they can convert and keep coming to the games and continue to support the club, within the league games outside the Hawthorns. Yeah, that's the legacy behind today. Is can we actually, we're not expecting 1,800 people that was here today to come down to Coles Lane next week, and we don't really want them to because car parking would be a nightmare. But we certainly would like for another couple of hundred people to become regular attendees at our games. We'd want for them to put the pressure on the club to say, let's do this more often. Social media and stuff, I would really like for that to be positive and showcase the fact that we do have a talented group of people who deserve to have the exposure, and I think that's the main thing really that's come from today. Yeah, absolutely, and it's a fantastic occasion, and obviously Lee's moment in front of the fans was incredible. What would that have been like for her? Incredible for Lee. Lee's been with us for a while. We have quite a high turnover of players at the club, but she's been with us for a few seasons now, and local girl, and she's a grafter. I love watching her in training, in games. She's always working so hard for every ball. So to score and, like you say, in front of the crowd and peel off in towards the corner where the fans were, would have been a great moment for her. And Evie as well, scoring a great goal second half, coming on as a sub. She's just been consistent and really reliable for us over the last few years as well. And for her to score, really marked a brilliant occasion. But you know what? Two goal scorers there, but the goalkeeper, Poppy Bastard, was incredible today.
Yeah, she was fantastic.
And also there was 6 RTC graduates that have played in today's game, so the girls that have come from our junior academy, all of them acquitted themselves brilliantly. So, as I mentioned, just a real big squad effort.
Yeah, and finally, Dave, do you think this is a prospect of having games at the Hawthorns? Is that something you hope to have more regularly? Is that something that could possibly happen again?
Yeah, at this moment in time, I'm thinking I want to fill up the stands, all of the stands. I want to fill the stadium. I want to get 23,000 people down here to a game, and then you start to think, well, okay, Dave, calm down a bit. But I think that we've made a really good effort today. I think we've shown people what we're about. It would be great if we could double the attendance the next time that we have a game down here, so potentially get up to 4,000 would be brilliant.
Yeah.
The next thing is obviously to enjoy it, reflect what went well, what do we need to do better next time. Maybe there's some marketing stuff and different bits that we can add now that we can be a bit more brave in terms of the decisions that we made, because we know that certain things work. And then when we've got a strategy for the next time round, we'll be certain to let the fans know early that we're going to be doing it again, because it was a fantastic day out for all of them, and we want to try and get them back in and more. As I say, it'd be great to get 4,000. Then when we get 4,000, can we double that to 8,000?
Yeah.
So in a couple of years' time, we're really filling the place up.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much, Dave.
There we go. You've heard from Dave, and what a great performance it was from West Bromwich Albion women. And a massive thank you again to Dave for taking out time after the game and sticking around, I suppose, when all the fans had gone, to have a little chat with me for the podcast. So, yeah, hopefully you've enjoyed this episode. Nice to cover a little bit of the women's football, and nice to also film a matchday vlog from that game. If you haven't checked that out already, make sure you go and do so, because it was a really great occasion. As I said, I've said that about a million times now, but yeah, you'll hear my full analysis in that matchday vlog, and of course some atmosphere, clips from the game, both celebrations for both goals. So yeah, make sure you go and check that out. There'll be a link in the description of the podcast to check that out. And yeah, that's about all we've got time for. A great week and a great weekend for Albion as a club, both the men's and women's sides picking up 2-0 victories in what seemed like historic occasions for both sides. A historic win for Albion's men's team is in their first win in 8 games, but a historic also victory for West Bromwich Albion women in their first ever game at the Hawthorns, and hopefully the first of many. But that brings me to the end of the Baggies podcast. Make sure you subscribe and leave us a nice little rating if you've enjoyed the episode, and make sure you keep on listening. We'll be back again next week for another episode. Of course, Hull, Huddersfield and Fulham coming up next week. So yeah, looking forward to those games, especially a little bit more after those wins over the weekend. But yeah, that's the end of the Baggies podcast for this week. Make sure you subscribe, leave us a rating, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.